Today's session, we're going to be learning about the sefira, counting of the haomer. Already spent a lot of time in the first sif and some tough pay tests. We already had one session where we had some review on this. So today we're going to continue on with this review and hopefully successfully conclude this review as well. That being said, we're going to go through this Word document that I compiled. And we are, based on what we did, to summarize what we did, should women count sefira? The Rambam says that women are exempt from the mitzvah of sefira. And the Kesef Mishnah explains that women are exempt from sefira because it is a time-bound mitzvah. It's a mitzvah sashay, shezman grom, and we know that any mitzvah that is bound by time, women are exempt from. There are many reasons for this. Afterwards, so after the Magen Avram quotes this, he says that women accepted this mitzvah of sefira on themselves as an obligation. Many poskim quote this, including the Mishnah Berurah. What does this mean? How could women accept something on themselves that they are exempt from? The Pri Megadim explains that sefira is similar to ma'ariv, just like ma'ariv is technically optional, according to some opinions. Nevertheless, men accepted ma'ariv as an obligation. The same applies to sefira. Even though women are exempt, nevertheless, they accepted it upon themselves as an obligation. Pri Megadim concludes by saying that this requires more research. Shechiyanu questions if it is possible to obligate oneself in something that one is exempt from. We do not find such a concept in any other place. Says the Minchas Chinuch. This should not be compared to Ma'ariv. Minchas Chinuch doesn't explain why it shouldn't be compared to Ma'ariv. He just said that it shouldn't be compared to Ma'ariv.
Didn't we say why?
We did, but the Minchas Chinuch himself didn't.
Really, you didn't? Okay.
Yeah. We did. The Oz V'Had Mishnah Berurah explained
Maybe
that.
that was it.
There are some opinions that hold that it is prohibited for women to perform time-bound mitzvahs. How then could women obligate themselves in the mitzvah seder? What is the explanation of this Minchas Chinuch? Why can't women accept the mitzvah of seder like how men accept Ma'ariv? Just like how men accepted Ma'ariv. Why can't women accept the mitzvah seder as an obligation? Like how men accepted Ma'ariv. Oswald the Mishnah Berurah explains. The Derech Moshe says that, the Derech Moshe says that something that is completely optional, according to all opinions, cannot be accepted as an obligation. Only something that is an argument, if it is obligatory, can be accepted as a obligation. The reason for this is one could go according to the opinion who says that it is an obligation. This applies to Marv, because there were two different opinions. Rabbi Gamliel was always of the opinion that Marv is a full-fledged complete obligation. This is precisely the Pri Megadim's doubt of how sefira could be compared to Marv. Perhaps sefira could be okay. So this is what the Minchas Chinuch was questioned by also. This is also why the Minchas Chinuch said, don't compare sefira to Marv. Perhaps sefira could be compared to shofar. Mariel says that women are exempt from shofar since it is a time-bound mitzvah. However, they cause themselves to be obligated. This could answer the Pri Megadim Minchas Chinuch's question and explain the Magen Avram. Okay. Okay. So I guess that sentence that I added was kind of said at the end. Okay, so this is the basic background information of sefira for women. Rav Elyashiv says that a wise woman who is married to a Talmud Chacham and is precise with performing mitzvahs is able to count sefira with the beracha. All the females in the Cyprus family would count sefira with the beracha. The females in Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach's house would not count sefira with the beracha. Beis Yosef said it's prohibited for Sephardi women to count with the beracha. Kaf Chaim says that Sephardi women shouldn't recite the beracha if they count sefira. If possible, a woman should listen to a man's beracha on sefira and then count. Similarly, Or Lezion says that Sephardi women shouldn't even count with a beracha.
So essentially, they're saying they should go to shul.
Excuse me, without a beracha. What'd you say?
So they should go to. Assuming they would go to Marav. What would they do?
Who?
These women who have to listen to the bracha.
Well, according to the Kaf Chaim, they would, for example, what we do in our house on Shabbos night, when in shul it's before Seisel Chavim,
That's
so I
just Shabbos
count
night.
later at home with the bracha. So then my
That's
wife listens to the bracha and then immediately counts herself.
what does she do the rest of the week?
Rest of the week, no bracha.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, a woman has to know herself. At the end of the day, there's what to rely on any side. If you want to count, count. If not, not. She has to know herself, you know? First of all, she has to understand, like we saw in the Mishnah Brura.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quoted over here. Okay, so I didn't even quote the Mishnah Brura over here. Mishnah Berurah says that the custom for women is not to count. If they do count, then Mishnah Berurah says not to say the beracha. Okay, so that's the Mishnah Berurah's ruling. And the reason why he says not to is because they don't know the explanation of the words. And furthermore, the Yitu, they're going to make a mistake. So the explanation of they're going to make a mistake is they're not going to know that if you miss counting a day, that then you could no longer count with the bracha anymore, and they're going to continue counting with the bracha. So if a woman knows that, and additionally she knows the explanation, then she could count, and especially what Rav Eliyashiv said before, she's wise, careful with mitzvahs, and married to Talmid Chacham, whatever, all those things. She could count if she wants to, with the bracha. If she's Ashkenaz, she should be careful of, with all those things. Remember, if she misses once, then she loses the bracha for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you're out, you still listen to the bracha from someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Ramban says that the mitzvah sefira isn't a time-bound mitzvah. This is in the Chidushin Ramban and Kedushin. What is the explanation of this? Many explanations. Avinezer says maybe it's not time-bound because it's always after the first day of Pesach and it's connected to Pesach. Just like women are obligated in the halachas of Pesach, so too they're obligated in sefira. Tirmel says there might be a printing error in the Ramban. Another explanation is if sefira wasn't counted in the korban haomer, can't be brought in shvuas, can't happen. Thus, women would be obligated in sefira since sefira is not an independent mitzvah. Rather, it is a preparation for the korbanos of the holiday of shvuas. Women are obligated in communal korbanos. Another answer, the Cheskel says the mitzvah sefira is dependent upon something else, aka bringing the korban haomer. Sefira isn't considered time-bound. Sefira isn't intrinsically time-bound. Rather, it depends on the korban haomer. That's just an interesting footnote in all this. Meaning it's not physically in the footnote, but it's an interesting concept. Why don't women count 7 clean days with the bracha? This was a interesting question. Chok Yaakov asks why women don't count 7 clean days with the bracha, right? Charles Chuvas Baz says that counting, Simon was that in again? 1102. Says that counting 7 clean days isn't obligatory. A woman who doesn't want to be with her husband doesn't need to count 7 clean days and go to the mikveh. It's controversial. She could remain impure. Women, therefore, do not recite brachas on counting 7 clean days. Chiluk Yaakov questions this. Because how then could women recite a bracha when they immerse themselves in a mikveh? If you're telling me that the whole thing is optional, technically they could remain impure. So then, how do they say when they go to the mikveh? We know that they do. Furthermore, how could a shochet, someone who slaughters an animal in a kosher manner, recite a bracha? Optionally, someone's optionally eating meat. This question can be asked on all optional brachos. Rather, that Baz offers another reason why women don't count 7 clean days. That's answer 1.
What's wrong with like hayom yom like?
And with the bracha, though, main thing is the bracha. Today is day 1. Today is day 2.
But they don't have to say that every day, right?
Right? Why not?
But there's no mitzvah I mean, there's no mitzvah to count out loud, right? There's no
Why not? That's what we're handling, right?
because the lashon of the pasuk, okay? Because use the same lashon.
Meaning it doesn't say it doesn't say svarta lacha. Does it say that? Does it say that in the Torah? What does it say by Shevanikim?
Said
similar thing, right? Rather, Radbaz offers another answer why women don't count 7 clean days. She might see more blood during the 7 clean days and would need to begin a new count. This would render the original bracha in vain. Chok Yaakov explains that this is something that is common. He goes into the Chok Yaakov that this is more common that she'll see blood in the middle of the 17
that's
days. Rather, he was comparing it to fasting, if you remember, the Chok Yaakov, when we did it.
About the fasting.
Yeah, he was comparing it to a fasting, how, I mean, I could pull it up on the screen, obviously, but this would shed light also on, what topic were we just saying? On sefira. What do you mean? You might make a mistake, right? You might not finish it. It will be in vain. No, but this is more common.
We said mitzvah to count the day, mitzvah to count the week. So there is a mitzvah on a daily basis that you can definitely there's Sheva Shabbos to shechiyanu, but
right. But if you're going to lose the bracha though, so then you're going to say it's in vain. It's going to be the same, right? Same logic there, right?
Like we said, that goes into the whole thing with the kid who gets bar mitzvah in between,
Okay, still, right? So if you look at the end of the Chok Yaakov, L'chin nirali tam rishonim ikar, okay? Im tir tistor lemafreya lechach, eno mivarech. She's going to see retroactively and mess up the whole thing, right? Okay. Then he says, even according to the poskim who say that a tainis yachid on an individual fast, you would say aninu in the morning, even though that extenuating circumstances might occur and you might not finish the fast. The Radbaz answers, you have tainis shal, so a little different. Okay, I forgot that specific part. It's considered a fast even for the few hours that you fasted, unlike by need that's going to mess up the whole thing. And then he says, oh, this is what I was referring to. And then he says, you don't even need to come on to that answer because by a fast, it's an uncommon thing. You're just going to break it if you say you're going to fast. Unlike by blood, that's prevalent and you can't stop that.
You have no control.
Right, you have no control. For the most part. For the most part. You have damn chima and another thing, but for the most part. So that's what I was referring to. So that could tie back into sefira. You're most likely going to finish the sefira. Why don't we say shechiyanu by sefira? A lot of answers. Ran explains that sefira merely commemorates the base of Mikdash. Ran explains that shechiyanu is only said on something that is pleasure, something physical. For example, dalaminum comes for happy purposes, or shofar, which reminds us of Hashem, or Megillah, where Hashem had mercy on us and redeemed us, or Pidyon Ben, where the father is happy that his son was successfully born. Conversely, there is no pleasure by sefira. In fact, it is painful that the base of Mikdash was destroyed. Answer 3, Levush explains that sefira comes for Yom Tov. We rely on the shechiyanu we say by Yom Tov to cover this sefira. Rely on the shechiyanu that we say by Shavuos. Answer 4, Lavush explains we are commanded, with one of my favorite answers, to count sefira from the time we left Egypt until when we receive the Torah. We are like someone who anticipates the day he will be given a great gift. He anticipates when this day of happiness will arrive. This makes the Torah dear to us. How could we say shechiyanu if this happy time didn't arrive yet? Shechiyanu can only be recited on something happy, and this time didn't arrive.
Nobody
yet.
says that the shechiyanu on the second day Yantiv can go on sefira, is there? We didn't see that. Like to have it in mind.
No,
A lot of people saying it's on Shavuos, but Shavuos you've been doing it for 41 days.
Correct. Yes, we did not see such a thing. We did see a question of how you could even count sefira when you're saying Kiddush. The opposite thing is showing it's not Pesach anymore.
Wait, how much
The problem, like at the end of Sukkot, we saw that question. That was the Magen Avraham. How much what?
how much time can elapse between when you say the shechiyanu in the Misa? The whole day?
Yeah, so in general, by shechiyanu, technically, if you're saying it like on the Yom Tov, you could do it even in the middle of the marketplace, in the middle of nowhere, and that's what we do on Yom Kippur. We just put it in the beginning of davening. But yeah, technically. Yeah. Furthermore, when we were learning the halachas of Chanukah, we learned together the Gemara and Shabbos and Chav Gimel, but Aleph, and I think it was some in Tuf Reish Ayin Vav or Ayin Hey, where we were saying that if you don't have a menorah and you're not going to get one, you're not going to be able to light, you would still say the bracha of shechiyanu on the first night, and you would say Shas Nisim Lavaseinu. You just wouldn't be
You
able to say
see somebody
Lahavdil.
else lighting, or just this
Right. It was talking about how Roa is an air. Right, correct. It was seeing if you see. I think even we came out that even you could say shechiyanu even if you don't see someone. From what my memory, whatever, it could be. I have to. I don't even know if I typed the thing up. It's uncommon, but Ba'omer, La'omer, Siddur, Arizal, the Gra, and the Chazon Ish would say Ba'omer. I thought that Arizal was La'omer. I'm tempted to just take out Siddur Arizal. I don't know if that's true.
Do you have it on the?
Yeah, I'm gonna look when I have time. Clean either. I have to remember to do that. I thought it was Omer, and that's why Nusach Sfar does Omer. Okay. A proof to this is people say lag Omer, not lag Omer! Exclamation point. It's an a punch usually. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach would first say Omer and then count Omer. He would not instruct others to do this. Discipler says that someone who does this should do this by counting the entire phrase of specifying the days and the weeks twice. Don't just change it to Omer, Omer. You got to say the whole thing again. This is the best data. This is what I personally do. And you cover all opinions on this. The question is, yes, you cover all opinions, but Lamaisa, when you're Chazan, which has happened a few times throughout Sfira, and you're making the decision, what are you going to do with the La or the Ba? It's the one that the bracha is going to go on right after, right? It should be added over here. Mishnah Berurah says that this is only regarding what is preferable to do. One would fulfill his obligation of counting sefira even if he didn't say either.
He didn't say both. No. He didn't say either.
Yeah, either. As long as he counted
The days.
the days and weeks. Right? That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. The Mishnah Berurah says.
Okay.
Don't forget that.
It makes sense because the Mechaber didn't put the Omer alone, right? Remember that we always saw the Ramah.
Correct. The Ramah 4 times, right? So this is fresh on my mind. I just learned this with one of my chavros yesterday. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. He loves this. Loves this. How could you not? Learning Torah properly. What's better than learning Torah properly? You see the growth keeps building. Okay, so this is the story of La'omer Ba'omer. There were technical differences. Why to say La? Why to say Ba? Look at the Mishnah Berurah over there. The Oz V'Hada Mishnah Berurah. They explain it nicely. The Mishnah Berurah doesn't talk about it.
So at the end of the day, they don't say one's preferable than the other. It's just
people who learn the halachas of sefiras haomer, they look at the Mishnah Berurah and Sif Aleph and they see that Mishnah Berurah said Ro poskim say to say La'omer. But if you continue your quest through the halachas of sefiras haomer, which we won't be able to do this year, just because we're already going to be at 44 tonight, and then by the time Shabbos is over, 45 Moshe Shabbos, 46 Sunday, so we're already going to be 47 when we meet again. So there's not much more we could chew on, right? So we'll try to get some shuas in.
Yeah.
But The idea is if you continue your quest through the halachas of sefiras haomer, so you will see that the Mishnah Berurah says בעומר. So he's saying that way in a few other places. So I don't think you could bring a proof that the Mishnah Berurah held to say לעומר, just from the fact that when he discusses, he says most poskim say to say לעומר. I don't know why he says לעומר here though. So I think this is what I think you could really argue anyway. I think Nusach Ashkenaz typically does בעומר. I've noticed here in the White Show a lot of people do לעומר. I don't know why. I think in the Siddur it says בעומר for Ashkenaz, right? So I like that proof also, like בעומר. I mean, there's a little one-sided, to be honest. This small little paragraph. You clearly see that there's an emphasis on the בעומר with this proof, with the lag בעומר, but it's what to discuss. This fear need to be counted in Hebrew. Mishnah Berurah rules that it is permissible. Yeah.
What?
Mishnah Berurah rules that it is permissible to count sphere in any language one understands. Someone who doesn't understand the language he counted would not fulfill his obligation, even if he counted in Hebrew, since he didn't understand what he said. This isn't considered counting. You saw potential leniencies. Just stick with the Mishnah Berurah on this. Don't play with fire. Do it in a language you understand. It's pretty easy to keep. You need to stand while saying sefira. Shulchan Aruch says that one needs to stand for sefira. Aruch HaShulchan quotes Torah says that one needs to stand for sefira, since sefira is a big matter. Like Shemona Esrei, Mishnah Berurah says that one needs to stand from the beginning of the bracha. B'diavad post facto, someone who counted sefira sitting down would still fulfill his obligation. Tangentially, all of the mitzvahs that require standing are derived from sefira. Okay, it's not a quote over here, but the Josh is al tikri me'achel chemesh bakama. When you begin with the sickle to cut the standing stalk, al tikri bakama el bakayma. Rather, don't read it as standing stalk. Rather, read it standing. Begin with the sickle at that time. That's when you do sefira standing. All of the mitzvahs are derived from this. It says lachem by sefira. In many other places, it says lachem, such as daled minim, shofar, mila. Right, a lot of other mitzvahs it says lachem. That's how we learn that you have to stand. The question is, how early does this drasha of Atukim Bikama Alabakoma that you should stand go back to? It's not in the Shas Bavli nor the Yerushalmi. Rishonim, many Rishonim quoted, including the Rosh. There's different explanations of the text in the Rosh who says the Tanur Rabbanon, because we don't know of such a brisa. Some say that it's a printing mistake, but nevertheless, Rishonim quote this, and it's something to contend with, and all of the mitzvahs that we stand for are learned from this. So the halach is that b'diavad, if a person would sit, he would fulfill his obligation. The reason for this, as we just saw, this halacha, it's in bold over here. The reason for this is because it's not a full-fledged drasha, and therefore you could be lenient. So near Lefini side, it's kal v'chomer any mitzvah. If sefira, which is the model mitzvah that everything else is being learned from, could be done sitting, technically speaking, post facto, so too any mitzvah b'diavad could be done sitting. It should be pointed out also, I decided not to type it, which is smicha ki yeshiva dami. If you're leaning on something to the extent if that which you're leaning upon will be removed, you would fall. That is a halacha status of sitting, and therefore you should not lean on something when you count the sefira or any mitzvah that you need to stand for. What did you say, David?
No, I didn't say anything.
Okay, so that's some very important mitzvahs, halachas about sitting versus standing. You need to count the days and the weeks. Okay, we'll do this again. This is really, I just not cut it, but I copied and pasted this from the section we learned on the first review over here, which is the topic of is fear from the Torah or from the rabbis. Or I might have also actually rather copied this from where we discussed the bare halacha of how many mitzvahs is sefira, but Shemaya Kaona, could you listen to someone else say the beracha sefira and count sefira and fulfill your obligation? Because listening is like answering, or do you need to personally count it yourself? So on that topic, there was a fair halacha that discussed that, and the basic idea is. And yeah, so it came from two of those places, this idea. The Ozvah, the Mishnah Berurah relates to the Torah explicitly states the mitzvah of sefira begins from the day the korban haomer is brought until 50 days later. There is an argument among the Rishonim if the mitzvah of sefira is dependent on bringing the korban haomer. Therefore, some say that since we don't have the korban haomer, the obligation of sefira is only rabbinic. Others say that the mitzvah of sefira isn't dependent on the korban haomer. Rather, the Torah related a sign when we should begin counting sefira. According to them, there is still an obligation to count sefira nowadays from the Torah. Okay? So, in other words, we have two ideas over here. Maybe nowadays that we no longer have the korban haomer, sefira in nature is only rabbinic, or perhaps that the mitzvah sefira isn't dependent on the korban haomer, meaning it would still be an obligation from the Torah nowadays, right? Rather, the idea over here is that the Torah said that this is a sign, meaning when the korban haomer is brought, that's when you begin counting sefira. Not that necessarily sefira and its obligation of being midaraisa from the Torah not would have to be based on the korban haomer. According to them, there is still an obligation to count sefira nowadays from the Torah. The base of this argument is based on the Gemara Menachos. The Gemara relates that Abaye says that the mitzvah is to count the days and weeks of sefira. Rabbanan Debei Ravashi said would count the days and weeks. haomer would count the days, but not the weeks. haomer said that this commemorates the base of Mikdash. Rashi explains that the counting nowadays isn't obligatory because we no longer have a korban haomer. Rather, we count nowadays to commemorate the base of Mikdash. Therefore, counting the days alone is adequate. In other words, since nowadays we are not obligated from the Torah to count sefira, therefore merely counting the days is sufficient, is enough. However, where?
From.
Where?
Obligated from.
Oh, okay, shkach. No, on the contrary, to count sefira from the Torah to count sefira, therefore merely counting days is enough. However, when the Beis Hamikdash was around and they brought the korban haomer, they certainly also counted the weeks. However, Rabbanan Debei Ravashi argue on argue on a meimar. This is also corrected above. They argue on a meimar and will count the days and the weeks. What do they hold?
I thought we said that haomer said you do count the days and the weeks, right?
A meimar? No, go back.
Haomer's the only one who said just days.
A meimar would count the days, but not the weeks, right? Right here.
Okay.
Okay. So Rabbanan Debei Ravashi argue on a meimar and will count the days and the weeks. What do they hold? Do they hold that even nowadays the obligation counts sefiras from the Torah and therefore they also counted the weeks? Or do they hold, like haomer who said that nowadays we're not obligated to count sefira from the Torah? Rather, when the rabbis enacted to count sefira, it was like how the mitzvah of sefira is performed when obligated from the Torah, aka to count the days and the weeks. Is that question unanswered? There's a very interesting third opinion in the Rishonim that the Be'er Halacha doesn't quote. Rabbi Yerucham holds that nowadays we are obligated to count the days during sefira from the Torah, and we are rabbinically obligated to count the weeks nowadays. The reasoning behind this is there are two psukim which relate the obligation to count sefira. We learn from the pasuk in Vayikra that mentions days that we are always obligated to count sefira from the Torah, even when we don't have a korban haomer. However, the second pasuk that only mentions weeks teaches us that we are only obligated from the Torah to count the weeks when we have the korban haomer. With this, we can understand why we don't recite two brachos on sefira. Aren't counting the days and weeks two mitzvahs that should require two different brachos? Rather, since counting the days is the main mitzvah from the Torah, we therefore only recite the bracha on the days. We only count the weeks in order to commemorate what happened when the Beis Hamikdash was around. The bracha we recite on the days covers the potential bracha we need to recite on the weeks. This is similar to why we don't recite a bracha on the Ravos on Hoshana Rabbah. Bracha we recite on the Dalid, meaning covers the potential bracha on the verse. Therefore, the Ravos are only a custom, and we don't. And we don't recite brachos on customs. Similarly, some don't recite a bracha on Hal and Rosh Chodesh since it's only custom. We don't recite brachos on customs. Also, the Mishnah learns that according to Rabbi Yerucham, when the Beis Hamikdash was around, they would recite two brachos on sefira.
Who holds that Arabas are just a minute? I think I said this before. You answered me. I forgot. I thought it's halacha Moshe Sinai.
That's a discussion. It's a discussion. It's in Suk over there. It's in Tainus, end of Tainus. One interesting question that one of my chavruses asked is, according to this understanding of the Rabbeinu Yerucham, the Beis Hamikdash was around, they would recite two brachas on sefira. What was the nusach of the second bracha? Right? Interesting. What was that text? So, okay, so what was this section officially? Do you need to count the days and the weeks? Okay, I messed up here. I didn't say what the Mishnah Brewer says. Messed up. I forgot to. Should have spent about an hour on this. The Mishnah Brewer says that someone who counted just the days would still fulfill his obligation. He should count again though, right? We said he should still nevertheless recount the days and weeks without a bracha. If he forgot to recount the days and the weeks without a bracha, he should still continue counting sefira the other days with a beracha. However, someone who only counted the weeks would not fulfill his obligation. So that's the basic Mishnah Berurah.
I think you said counting twice.
Yeah, I saw deleting words. However, someone who only counted
to continue counting instead of writing continue counting twice.
Where?
It was right there.
If he forgot to recount the days and the weeks without a bracha, he should still
continue counting. For some reason, you wrote counting twice.
Oh, he should still continue counting. Yeah, continue counting. See the other days with the bracha. This is the basic Mishnah Berurah. We spent more time on this. This is a summary.
How would you count only weeks?
The shaila becomes if it's day 7 and you said today is week 1. So would that work, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so that's right.
More has to be added to this. The more that I go through this and verbalize what I'm saying, the beginning verbally, you think about what you're missing. We spoke about the Mishnah Berurah said, Lamashal, okay, right over here. Mishnah Berurah said if someone says today is day 50 minus 3, you would fulfill his obligation. Right? We learned this a long time ago. It doesn't happen, but however, if a number wasn't said, then he would not fulfill his obligation. So you have to say a number.
Does that mean if somebody says you're supposed to count, let's say at night, right?
Yeah.
And somebody would say today is 50 minus 6.
Yeah, that'd be good.
He wouldn't be able to say it with a bracha then.
Yeah, like probably not. Probably not.
Interesting.
However, if a number wasn't said, such as this is the end of sefira minus 3, then he would not fulfill his obligation. You need a number. You need real math, digits. It's like an Excel spreadsheet. You need numbers for it to work.
Wait, so how could you say log ba'omer then?
How could you say it? It's log Omer.
It's a problem. I
But
think
log
You
ba'omer,
can't say on log Omer. You should not say log Omer before you count sefira.
no, but you can't say what's log. That's a gematria. That's a
the number in
It's a
Hebrew.
number.
log is saying if you go up to it. Oh, if you say all right, if you say
Yeah.
I won 33.
Yeah, it's a number. Okay, let's conclude with this small paragraph. We have 2 minutes left. Is thinking or writing considered counting? Beracha says that someone who thought about the day of Sefira would not fulfill his obligation because thinking is not like speaking. Okay, here a lav kedibur dami. Thinking is not like speaking. Mishnah Berurah in Hilchos Birchas Torah says that some hold that writing Torah is like speaking because there's a physical act. However, others hold that writing is like thinking. Mishnah Berurah rules that writing is like thinking. Aruch Shulchan explains that even according to those who hold that writing is like speaking, this only refers to a situation where the purpose of the writing is to reveal one's thoughts. However, in a case where the mitzvah is speaking, for example, Shema or Tefillah, writing is considered thinking. No, writing is not considered thinking.
Like that.
It's not considered thinking. Even according to those who hold that writing is like speaking, this only refers to a situation where the purpose of the writing is to reveal one's thoughts, unlike over here. Okay, therefore, someone who counts Sefira by writing would not fulfill his obligation, even if he intended to fulfill the mitzvah of Sefira, and he must verbally count with a beracha. When the disciple would write letters during Sefira, he would write the day of Sefira on the letter. The disciple would make sure to daven Marv and count Sefira before writing the letter. Probably if it was after Plaga Mincha, because he was concerned that maybe you could fulfill your obligation. So you don't fulfill your obligation, but there's this idea of being stringent, not to write before you count Sefira, the days of Sefira. So this is basically a summary. We certainly left things out, such as if you're crossing the international date line, counting Sefira is better not to do that at all. But yeah, there's complicated. That's why you shouldn't. But if you have to, one of my chavrus, his in-laws are in Australia, right? So what are you going to do if you're going to travel there for 50 days?
Well, I
Right?
guess something with Shabbos, the Shabbos about Hawaii, right?
Oh yeah, like crazy. So anyways, this is a summary, so to say. It's 10 pages of the first sif that we did.
So what does one do? I mean, Hawaii is just a Shabbos problem, right? It's not a sefira problem, I would
Yes, yes,
because
It's both, right?
Mom
It's
is the
both.
national date line.
yes.
Hawaii would be both.
Huh?
Wouldn't Hawaii be both? A problem with Shabbos and Sefira?
It's not. The thing is that from what I understand, it's just the Shabbos.